Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Monday morning to you all. I hope you guys are doing great out there this morning and having a wonderful start to your day and a great beginning to your new week out there so far. I got you a video that will be jam-packed full of information. Of course, most of this video will be discussing what will soon be Tropical Storm Francine, as of right this second, still dubbed PTC6. But by the time a lot of you folks watch this video, it will be Tropical Storm Francine. Francine will become a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico over the next 24 to 48 hours. How strong will this hurricane become? That is a big question, as peak intensity as far as wind speeds has increased from 75 to 80 miles per hour since we made the video last night. I expect it to increase a little bit more. In fact, I would not be surprised one bit if this becomes a Category 2 hurricane. So what we're going to do is discuss what's going on with this system right now, the latest from the National Hurricane Center. We'll go over all the model guidance. We'll talk about the environment that does support a stronger scenario with soon-to-be Francine. We're not going to speak much on steering currents because the steering of this is pretty simple. I mean, it's going north. There's nothing that's going to really stop this from heading north in general. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, if any at all, when breaking down this specific tropical system. But we'll talk about impacts too. We're going to talk more in a more detailed manner on impacts as we move a little bit closer to this system's landfall, which will be as early as midday Wednesday, potentially as late as maybe Thursday morning. So we're going to have a nice timestamp and segment up for impacts with this. We'll talk about winds, rain, and after we do all that, we will discuss two areas I'm watching out in the Atlantic. That is no concern right this second, but we are certainly watching them, as I do think one of them will take the next name, which will be Gordon after Francine. So we'll speak on that, and then of course we got you covered for what's going to happen weather-wise across the entire lower 48 for your Monday. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it, and if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. So this is our system right now. Like I said, still potential Tropical Cyclone 6. I mean, maybe as soon as the 8 a.m. update here in the next hour or so, this will be Tropical Storm Francine. It doesn't change any information that I'm sharing with you guys in this video. But if you look here, you see the intense pinks and whites. This indicates colder cloud tops, which means we have strong convection, taller updrafts extending way up in the atmosphere. The higher up you get in the atmosphere, the colder it gets. So that's why you have these very cold cloud tops, and this isn't well put together, which was pretty much expected at this point, but there is a lot of intense convection. And when I say convection, anytime throughout this video, I'm meaning shower and storm action out here in the Gulf of Mexico and areas of the Bay of Campeche still. So this is the system currently. It looks like it's well on its way to becoming not only a tropical storm, but a hurricane. And we know what the Gulf of Mexico can do. So this is the system right this second. Now I want to show you this very quickly, still labeled potential Tropical Cyclone 6, but you see the pressure down there? It says 1,003 millibar. So try to keep that in your back of your mind as we're moving forward, and we'll probably jump back to this, but it's 1,003 millibars right now. So not sub 1,000 right at this second, but just 1,003. That's important as we continue to make our way throughout the video. Moving at a whopping 5 miles per hour north-northwest. So it's a 50 mile per hour, pretty much a tropical storm at this point. The latest from the National Hurricane Center, this is per the 5 a.m. update. Another update will come out here at around 7:30, 8 o'clock this morning. Okay, it's a 50 mile per hour potential tropical cyclone. By the time we get into this afternoon, it will be dubbed Tropical Storm Francine. I would say there's a 90 to 100% chance of that. And then by the time we get into 2 a.m. tonight, a 65 mile per hour tropical storm. So steadily increasing, starting to pick up a little bit more forward speed as it moves north. And then by 2 p.m. Tuesday, it's a 70 mile per hour tropical storm. Then by the time we get into 2 a.m. Wednesday, this is a Category 1 hurricane. This could become a hurricane as early as tomorrow afternoon, I think. Okay, remember the peak intensity in last night's video was 75 miles per hour. Now the peak intensity is 80 miles per hour, which is still a Category 1 hurricane, 2 p.m. Wednesday. But folks, I really do think the peak intensity will increase again. I think it could get as high as maybe a 95, heck, maybe even a 100 mile per hour hurricane. That's my call right now. I do think we could at least get this to Category 2 status, unfortunately. But there could be some good news, and I'm going to discuss that good news as we make our way throughout the video. Don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves right here, but has it as a Category 1 hurricane Wednesday around 2 p.m. And moving right towards the Louisiana coastline. It'll most likely make some sort of landfall Wednesday p.m. Let's just call it like that. And then it obviously weakens with land interaction to a tropical storm, and we will zoom this out. I just want you guys to know widespread impacts will move inland right up the Mississippi Delta region, the Mississippi River. And of course, we know the east side of these tropical systems can be the worst with the tornado threat, even normally the most rain. So we'll be able to discuss impacts as far as further inland as we kind of figure out what's happening kind of closer in time to us, like the shorter term, right? We really need to focus a lot on Louisiana and areas of southern Mississippi here, and even Texas too. Don't want to ignore you guys. We're going to talk about you folks too. So this is the latest cone. The more traditional look from the National Hurricane Center. S stands for tropical storm, H hurricane, D tropical depression. This is what you guys are probably more used to seeing out there on the internet or wherever social media. So that's that. Let's go over all the latest model guides that we have. So we're going to just zoom into the southeast. This is way down here at the corner of your screen. So I know that most of this screen shows nothing, but if you look way down here, this is going to show up more so in the center of your screen as we move this forward. So we're going to start this off for Tuesday morning. Remember, the system is initializing right now is at 1,003 millibar low as of the 5 a.m. update. So by the time we get into Tuesday morning, tomorrow morning, September the 6th, this is a 996. Hopefully you can see the number pretty well. As we are getting into Wednesday morning, it goes from a 996 millibar low to a 983 millibar hurricane. Now, if we kind of compare 983 to the strength of a hurricane, that could be a strong Category 1. That could be a low-end Category 2 if we are trying to figure out what the millibar is compared to the category of the hurricane. Okay, we have to figure that one out still, right? So Wednesday morning, 983 millibar low hurricane. It deepens another 10 millibars right before landfall. Wednesday midday, let's just call it midday, early afternoon, 973 millibar. I mean, if the GFS is right, this is getting close to high-end Category 2 status, maybe even close to low-end Category 3 major status. But watch here. It goes from 973 to 979. So it looks like there might be a little bit of weakening as it approaches landfall. I think it'll hit its peak intensity right here in this area, right before it makes landfall. I don't think this will be a strengthening tropical system as it moves inland. I think it'll be starting to lose some steam before a land interaction. And I will talk about why here in a second, but that is my hunch. Could be wrong, but it makes landfall sometime Wednesday p.m. In fact, it makes landfall before the sun even fully sets in the central Louisiana coastline. Then, of course, this will bring widespread impacts, tropical storm force wind conditions, heavy rain, gusty winds, a tornado threat, well inland into Mississippi, Louisiana, and then eventually impact areas like Memphis. You know, Memphis is a city well far inland, but you guys are probably going to see impacts from this. Even Little Rock potentially, Jackson definitely, all the way over here to the Boot Hill, Missouri, eventually into the Midwest, the Ohio Valley potentially. So we'll be talking about this system all week, no doubt. Now, what about the Euro? Remember, the Euro is typically more of a conservative model. It normally does not show the stronger scenario. But the Euro already initializing as a 993 millibar tropical storm. Heck, maybe even a hurricane tomorrow morning. We continue to take this to about Tuesday evening. It's a 988 millibar strong tropical storm, either Category 1 hurricane by tomorrow evening. And then by the time we are making our way into Wednesday morning, this is a 975 millibar Category 2 hurricane, if we're basing it off millibar, here in the northwest Gulf of Mexico. And when we wake up when we wake up 48 hours from now, so Wednesday morning, September the 11th. Okay, and then look how it goes from 975 to a 980 in about 6 hours Wednesday morning. So it actually weakens as that number rises. The millibar number rises. That means this tells us we have some weakening, and then it re-strengthens. Okay, kind of weird, right? 980 to 975, and then it weakens a little bit more. If you look really closely, it goes from 975 to 978 Wednesday evening, and then it actually continues to weaken to a 982 and then a 983, but still makes landfall as a higher end Category 1 hurricane sometime Wednesday night. It looks like the Euro is a little bit later with this system. It looks like it moves it in definitely after the sun sets as far as the center of the storm. Makes landfall. Once again, the Euro shows a scenario where it's the strongest out in the Gulf of Mexico, but this will move in, bring widespread impact. So a 994 millibar low. we want to watch that Mississippi Delta area. This could cause like a brown ocean effect. We'll discuss that when we need to, but this will bring impacts well far inland. Okay. Now I do want to show you the icon because it showed this way out. I mean, it nailed this, right? 992 as we are getting into tomorrow afternoon. By the time we are into Wednesday morning, this is much further east. So icon has as a 980 high in category 1 hurricane, low in category 2 hurricane, and makes landfall as about that, a little bit closer to the Bayou of Louisiana, southeast Louisiana. This will bring more widespread impacts to Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Thibodaux, Houma, and all the communities here in southeast Louisiana, and then would bring more widespread impacts to probably Mississippi and then eventually Alabama. So the icon's a little bit further east, and we have to watch for those east to west ticks. That's very important. Now, if we're looking at the hurricane models, let's compare two. One's very aggressive, one's more of a scenario that's along what the National Hurricane Center is showing. So I do want to show you which one is this. This is the H-Wharf model. It's initializing the best, 1,002 millibar low this morning. So I feel like it is initializing probably the best out of all the hurricane models. So what does it do? Well, it's going to jump around. Your eyes are going to go back and forth. By the time we get into Tuesday morning, this is a 996 millibar tropical storm. We take it all the way into Wednesday morning. That was Tuesday morning we just showed. It goes from Tuesday morning to Wednesday morning. Does not show much strengthening of this system. It goes all the way to a 990, still a tropical storm. And then we get into about Wednesday afternoon. It's a 991 category 1, maybe low in category 2 hurricane. But you see how the bottom edge of this system, here's the center, bottom edge is kind of void of any intense convection. That's because dry air is getting sucked into the circulation of the system. And I really think that'll weaken the system. For example, look here. It goes from 981 to a 986 right before a landfall sometime late Wednesday night. So it does show some weakening upon landfall. And, I mean, if this is the actual structure of this system, it looks like a half a cane to me. It really looks like the southern edge of this system is being ate up by dry air because of the shear to the west. But this would still bring big-time impacts to Louisiana. And, of course, continue to bring impacts well inland. Now, if we look at one of these more, if we look at the HMON model, initializing pretty well, 1,004 millibar low. Okay, we take it into Tuesday morning, okay, 996 tropical storm. We take it into Wednesday morning. It has it as a 975 millibar category 2 hurricane. I mean, that's getting close to category 3. And it shows a much more beefier hurricane for sure. And, you know, but even this, right? It almost looks like the peak of this hurricane will be sometime Wednesday morning. But it goes from 975, watch how it weakens. But then it tries to strengthen again. Okay, but regardless, not to focus too much on that, it makes landfall as an all-out category 2 hurricane into the Louisiana coastline right here. See all? This is the eye wall, that intense reds and orange you see, and then it moves on in and continues to bring impacts inland. So those are two scenarios from the hurricane models. If we're looking at the European ensemble, not going to spend a ton of time on this, but they are starting to group up. You're not really getting many members going into the Texas coastline anymore. Most of them are kind of jumbled up right here, and you're starting to see some very intense members now. Some, you know, sub 980 millibar lows are in here, indicated by the orange here. We got some pretty strong hurricanes in here, even this one really strong one right here. But they're all basically kind of clustering up right into the central coastline of Louisiana, and then of course it moves inland throughout the rest of Louisiana and Mississippi and up the Mississippi River Valley. So this is, but I want you to notice here, look at this. You can see it the best right here, I think. It gets the most intense right into here, right? You see kind of the pockets of oranges, even some pinks, the yellows, but you see right in here how the colors kind of go back down to the yellows, the greens, and even some blues. So it looks like it's its strongest right here, but then kind of begins to weaken right before a landfall. So that's kind of what I'm watching here. And of course, I'm not trying to downplay the impacts. You guys know that. But, you know, I'll show you the reason why it shows that. First off, I want to talk about the environment as we are getting into really this evening into tomorrow. So if we stop it right here, okay, this is tomorrow morning. This particular hurricane model has this already as a 988 millibar low tomorrow morning. And it could be, guys. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised one bit. If you notice right here, this is winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And where you see the blues and the greens and the yellows, this is winds that are, pretty decent high speed in the upper levels of the atmosphere. You see the whites, this is where we have like a low shear environment. We got wind flow, but you have a lot of just stagnant airflow in the upper levels of the atmosphere. The air is not moving very fast. So the system is centered right in that really stagnant airflow in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So therefore, it has pretty much a low shear environment. And if you notice these lines with the arrowheads kind of embedded into it, so air is being dispersed this way. It's kind of weird right in here, but for the most part, there's hardly no flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere, but it kind of goes like this. Way over here, air is being pushed out right into here. So in general, you have an environment as we're getting into this evening. You already have an environment right now, this evening into tomorrow, into even Wednesday morning, an environment that supports air being dispersed out away from the storm. We call it an upper level anticyclone. It's basically we have an anticyclonic flow overhead of the cyclonic flow in the low levels of the atmosphere of this tropical system. What does that do? Well, when air rises in these tropical systems and the air is kind of being pushed away from the system, it gets dispersed outward. That allows for more air to rise. That gets dispersed outward. What does that mean? Rising air allows for shower and storm action, convection. Continuous shower and storm action allows for a moist environment to develop along and around that low-level circulation and moist environment. Around that low-level circulation allows for an improvement in structure with any specific tropical cyclone. If the structure can really develop and form, then you can undergo a period of what we call rapid intensification, and that's what we do not want to see. So this is it right here. The environment supports, at minimum, a moderate pace of strengthening, at minimum, in my opinion, for a period over the next, I would say, 48 hours. Okay, and you see that here as that this is like the aggressive HFB model. I don't know if this is going to get sub 960, but I would say you cannot bet against the Gulf of Mexico. So if you notice, the number drops way down, 959, and then it begins to rise here. You see how it goes from a 959 kind of like midnight to tomorrow evening into Wednesday morning. It goes from a 971. So you would think, why does it weaken here? Well, if you notice, air's still being kind of pushed out right here. That's an ugly arrow. Air's still kind of being dispersed right here and right here. But if you look right in here, you're getting some wind shear. See how the arrows are kind of going right up against the L? So what is that doing? Well, air is being pushed against this system on one side of it now. So this is creating wind shear against this cyclonic flow of this tropical system. So wind shear is affecting this side of this hurricane at this point, which will be Hurricane Francine. This opens up the opportunity for dry air to get entrained in the circulation of this tropical system. And you can see it well on how that happens here as we move to the moisture in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. So I believe this is the same model. It is. So, I mean, tomorrow morning, this model already has this as almost a hurricane. You see all the green. This indicates moist air completely circulating around this tropical system. That continues, does not change. We get into tomorrow evening, very moist environment. But look what's happening here. Okay, a lot of moist air on the northern, northeast, eastern side of the system, right? But look at what's happening here. As shear begins to hit this system, okay, we're starting to get some dry air, which is indicated in that brownish shaded color that's starting to wrap into the system. And the closer that it gets to that center of circulation, the more it's going to impact the actual cocooned kind of moist area of this tropical cyclone. So we get this back off. We keep on going. Look how close it gets. It's getting there. It's getting there. And then that is why this is actually weakening pretty dramatically on this specific run upon landfall. The entire southern base of this system gets ate up with dry air right in here. And this becomes kind of a half-a-cane where basically the northern side of the system is the worst and the eastern and northeastern side. And then the southern side of the system, could have strong winds, but it's kind of void of convection, shower, and storm activity because that dry air gets entrained into the circulation. I think that'll happen. The only way this does not happen, guys, is is if the wind flow gets kind of zonal with this tropical system. We're not going to get into that right now, and there's also the possibility that this system gets so strong earlier on, basically over the next 24 hours, that it basically cocoons itself so well with such a moist environment that it doesn't bother this system. The dry air basically doesn't have enough time to get entrained to the circulation of this system. So I hope that makes sense. But we continue to move forward here. As far as impacts, the chances to see tropical storm force winds, which you might as well say 40 mile per hour winds or higher, has increased to a 50 to a 60% chance along the Louisiana coastline and even along the Texas coastline. I mean, up to a 30 to 50% chance to see tropical storm force wind gusts. This will steadily increase, and we'll be showing you the chances to see hurricane force wind gusts here in the next video or two. The timeline of these winds, you're going to start to see tropical storm force wind gusts along with some of these banding features and the southern coastline of Texas as early as this evening, and then all throughout the next 24 to 48 hours, and then it'll take to about tomorrow, late tomorrow night before you start to see it in Louisiana, and then you'll see it for another probably 24 to 36 hours. Now, if we're comparing some model guidance here. If we're looking at the GFS as far as max wind gusts, this is max wind gusts, not consistent winds. The GFS has max wind gusts into the central Louisiana coastline hitting 75 to 85 miles per hour, but much stronger just off the coastline. You're getting close to 85, 90 miles per hour. But this does bring, 50 to 55 to 65, close to 70 mile per hour wind gusts into New Orleans, Baton Rouge. But look at these wind gusts all the way up into Mississippi. And we will show you more of Mississippi and Tennessee when we just get a little bit closer. But this does bring some very strong winds. Jackson could be an inland kind of city that gets impacted significantly from this, especially if the core of the system goes right ahead. So this is the latest from the GFS. What about the Euro? What does the Euro show with this? Euro is a little bit more of kind of a tinier system, if you will, but the Euro has over 100 mile per hour wind gust off the coastline, but it does show how it weakens. See how it's the strongest way out here in the Gulf, and then it moves into that central to western Louisiana coastline. The winds aren't quite as intense. You just got 70, 75, 80 mile per hour wind gusts along the Louisiana coastline. But this could change, guys. And we got some gusty winds pretty far inland, too. So we'll continue to show you this. I expect this to change, but it is worrisome how you have over 100 mile per hour wind gusts just barely off the shoreline of Louisiana and even Texas. So we're watching that, guys, for sure. Now, as far as rainfall, this will change a lot also, but if you live in this kind of orange shaded color here, that's where you could get 8 to 12 inches of rain, kind of this more muted orange color, kind of between the orange and the yellow, if you will. That's where you can get 6 to 8 inches of rain. If you live in the yellow, this is where you can get 4 to 6 inches of rain. Okay. And I think I was pointing to Jackson being right here. I don't know if Jackson is right there. I think they got Jackson labeled a little bit too far. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting my geography mixed up or something. But that's kind of tearing my nerves up here. Anyways, Jackson will certainly get impacts from this. Lake Charles, I think if you live between Lake Charles and New Orleans, that'll be, I think, the epicenter of the worst conditions with this. Okay, so that's rainfall. Expect this to change. Now let's talk a little bit about these areas of interest out here. All right, we have this one behind it that has a 60% chance to develop sometime over the next 7 days. And we have the one in front of it that has a 70% chance to develop. This is Invest 92L. When I say develop into a depression or a named storm, which in this case would most likely be Gordon. Okay, now if we look at some of these model runs here, the GFS first, I wouldn't focus on like both of these. For example, I mean, we have this aggressive looking wave coming off, but it doesn't even have that area dubbed as an area of interest. We could by the time we get into the next few updates. But it really wants to take whatever's coming off Africa here in the next 24 hours and developing that into a full-fledged tropical system. A lot of weird stuff going on out here. It finally gets one of these areas of interest that is currently in place in the National Hurricane Center going. So we have a strengthening tropical storm just north of the Leeward Islands. We also have a hurricane out here, way out in the central Atlantic, but it looks like it's gaining latitude. It looks like it's going to turn out to sea. So at the same time on the latest GFS, which I can tell you, with this area out here in the Atlantic, it is going back and forth. I mean, this run now about 6.5, 7 days from now has 2 hurricanes out here in the Atlantic, but they're not bothering a soul. So, and then they kind of like start to rotate around one another. It just gets kind of weird out here. But the GFS doesn't have, we could have two powerhouse hurricanes out here in the Atlantic through mid-September, but they might not bother a soul. Or they could. We just got to figure that one out. Now the Euro, what does it show with these tropical systems? I mean, just a bunch of dancing around of tropical energy. One doesn't want to develop, one finally does, but the latest Euro, I mean, it takes all the way till past the 7-day mark before it finally starts to slowly get this one tropical system together. So 10 days out from now, we have a weak tropical storm well northeast of the Leeward Islands. So this is not concerning. That's why I'm not spending a ton of time on it. The latest European ensemble run through 1 week out does have some stronger members, but it looks like it's kind of dropped off with some of the members. But we're still watching this. There's just no real point in spending a ton of time on this right at this second. So let's talk about what's going on back home. We're going to zip through this really fast because there's not a whole lot of active weather going on today across the lower 48. We see that blob of tropical moisture that's already affecting areas of extreme southern Texas. We got tropical energy off the coast of the southeast. We got tropical moisture kind of not very widespread across Florida, but definitely more of a moist environment. And we do want to watch this energy here in Ontario. This is going to bring some unsettled weather for southern Ontario over the next several hours, and then possibly bring a risk of some strong to severe storms across New York State today. I'm not expecting that to be a huge deal, but there is a risk. There is a marginal risk of severe weather in place. I would say that's probably where the most active weather is going to be across the lower 48 for today. A little bit of energy across the northern Rockies, but folks, it's pretty quiet out there. National Weather Service watches, warnings, and advisories. You got frost advisories, even some freeze warnings across the higher terrain of West Virginia and Virginia. Some red flag warnings across the high plains and the northern Rockies. And then we do have those tropical storm warnings out here in the Gulf of Mexico and watches. And we expect Texas and especially Louisiana, even into Mississippi, to get littered with tropical alerts over the next 24 to 48 hours. Heat advisories continue for southern sections of Florida. The excessive rainfall outlook, the only area we're watching out for is extreme southern Texas for today. Has a slight risk, which means there's at least a 15% chance of flash flood guidance being exceeded within 25 miles in a given location. Folks, everywhere else, not a big risk of heavy rainfall, but we will see, of course, the threat of flooding increase along the Gulf coastline in the coming days with soon-to-be Francine on the way. The risk of thunderstorms, if you live in the light green, just a general risk of thunderstorms, but the dark green, there's a marginal risk. So, the Tug Hill Plateau over to the Catskills, the Finger Lakes region, everybody in between, Watertown, Buffalo, Rochester, Binghamton, over to Albany, you have a level 1 out of 5 risk of severe weather. And that's just for some gusty winds. Can out rule out some small hail with this too. And we will speak on that when we get closer. As far as the weather in the southeast today, it's not going to be very active. We'll get some tropical moisture that'll try to get up to the Gulf coastline, but I think most of it will stay offshore. We will get widespread shower and storm activity that'll dance around Florida today. It'll be no different than what we typically see any other summer or late summer day, early fall. Of course, September is still definitely a summer month in September. September is still a summer month in Florida. I said September twice there. There's your one hiccup a day there. But widespread tropical moisture, I wouldn't be surprised. We get some flash flooding in this area. And basically in the whole entire peninsula of Florida has a risk of maybe a little bit of flash flooding. But as we're getting into tomorrow morning, that's when we start to see the increase of tropical moisture into southeast and just southern Louisiana. But weather today across the southeast, pretty calm unless you live in Florida. Now up here in the northeast, that energy will move out of Ontario. I think by the time we get into this evening, southern Ontario will be fine. The weather will relax. But we're going to get this kind of area of energy that just swings through New York State today. These storms could provide some gusty winds, some small hail. By the time you get into Vermont, New Hampshire, I think they'll lose some steam, but you could still be getting some storms here in central New York State, and there could be some lingering showers left over for the rest of New England. But by the time you wake up tomorrow morning, pretty calm conditions. The south central U.S., 95% of the south central U.S. will be pretty much just a calm day. We get into this evening, not a whole lot going on all the way into tomorrow morning, but we will kind of zoom into South Texas, where we'll continue to get this feed of moisture. So Brownsville will be very wet, but if you get up to Houston, not a whole lot's going to happen today. But, Brownsville will continue to just get rounds of shower and storm activity, maybe as far north as Corpus Christi. It's very possible. And, so we could get a couple inches of rain down here. But today, the weather's not going to be that intense. Just some rounds of tropical rains that'll move in. The north central U.S., quiet. Beautiful Monday expected. Maybe some showers are possible across the Dakotas. Not a whole lot to speak on. We wake up tomorrow morning, maybe a little bit of energy. We'll get some showers going across the Midwest, but outside of that, pretty calm weather. The western U.S., about the same, kind of the same pattern as yesterday. We'll get some pop-up showers across Utah, Wyoming, Colorado. That's very possible. But outside of that, we get into tonight. It calms down. Tomorrow morning, calm weather. And then the temperatures, it'll be a little bit, I wouldn't say chilly, but cooler up in the Northeast. 50s, 60s, 70s, depending on where you live. Back to the 70s and 80s, even some 90s across the deep south. Hot and humid down into Florida. It's definitely warming up across the Midwest, back into the 80s, even the 70s, maybe even some pockets of 80s in the UP of Michigan and Wisconsin for sure. And then the high plains, central plains, warming well into the 80s and 90s. Out west, it's definitely cooling back down. It's not as hot as it has been, so you're finally getting a little bit of a break from this intense heat, but still pretty hot in the Valley of California and the Southwest. That's all I got, guys. Tune in for tonight. I'll get you some more updates as far as soon to be Francine. God bless all y'all. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you again soon.